Welcome back to Ottawa Experts, everyone, where we are continuing our conversation tonight on permaculture and offering strategies for sustainable living with my guest tonight. And we were speaking a little bit about the idea of using what is on the land as opposed to trying to force your ideas and your way of wanting to do things onto the land. And I know that you built your home using these principles of permaculture. Can you take me through some of these principles? We started touching on them. What are the principles that somebody who is now building a new home, they've got the site, what do I do?
Oh boy, if they've got the site.
They have the site.
They're stuck.
They're stuck. Well, let's
if you
just say
don't
they
have
don't
the
have a
site,
site.
good news.
Okay.
Make sure that it's well drained and make sure that you've got great solar access.
Okay.
If you've got a little bit of a slope towards the south, that's an excellent site.
And so, okay, so you want a south sloping piece of area, right?
Yeah, with lots of sun.
Lots of sun, no forest, preferably, or few.
Forested lands are not broken.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
We are in a place in the world that should be covered with forests. It was covered with forests.
I understand.
So if you go in and you cut down trees, then you're just damaging what nature has just repaired.
Got it.
So please don't do that.
Don't do that. Okay, no more cutting trees.
But yeah, if you've got good solar access, think of it this way. In terms of soil temperature, a 5-degree slope is like you going 160 kilometers south for every 5 degrees.
So sorry, say that again. So for every
5 degrees of
slope that you have on your land
towards the sun, it's like going 160 kilometers south in terms of how the soil heats up.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So if it's January and it hits minus 25, it's going to be minus 25. There's no two ways about it.
Okay.
But that site overall is going to be much warmer. So
I see.
You're doing yourself a favor there.
And the diagram that we have on the screen right now shows what we're talking about here. So the more slope you can have.
The ideal building that we have in our climate is a long, thin building. And the long side should be pointed towards the sun. The more it's pointed towards the sun, the more free heat, I said free heat that you're getting.
Okay.
And it's coming anyway, we might as well do something with it.
Okay,
Yes.
and so on this diagram here, what you're showing is the idea that the greater the slope, or the angle of the house, what is this showing?
This is about the orientation of the building itself.
Okay.
So whether your site is sloped or flat, you're going to do better by pointing your building so that the long side of your house faces the sun.
Okay.
That's the best way to catch energy.
Okay, and so how are you, so you're looking for ways to trap energy, obviously to heat your home during the winter, and to keep, how do you keep your house cool in the summer?
Well, actually the same principle, if you design it correctly, what you do is you have the southern wall, since we're in the northern hemisphere, it's pointing towards the sun. The amount of window space on the south wall will be approximately equal to our latitude. So about 40 to 45% windows on the south side.
So, okay, so you have to consider 40 to 45%, half of the space, almost half of the space needs to be windows, is that what you're saying?
It could be less than that. People seem to do okay with less than that, but you're gonna be fine if you sort of match latitude to percentage of window space.
Okay.
I think I've got a little bit less than 45 on my own home, but the other major step is my foundation is a slab on grade foundation. That means that we cleared the land, packed sand down in there, and poured concrete.
Packed the land, poured sand, and then concrete. Why? What does that do?
Concrete is a dense, massive material which holds on to heat. So all of that sunlight that comes shining in the window, if you just have, say, insulated wood floors, your house will be nice and warm on sunny days when the sun is out. And as soon as it's gone, your heat's gone. In my home, the sun is heating up that concrete pad and storing the energy. So instead of these wild swings in temperature, everything is kind of evened out. Summertime now, I'm enjoying it because that same concrete pad is evening out temperatures. I don't have an air conditioner. I don't need an air conditioner. That concrete pad keeps my house cool.
Oh, Interesting. And are you using any unique building materials to build this home, or is it just the traditional plywood?
Yeah, it's more of a traditional type of home in my case. The local inspectors weren't too keen on what I originally wanted to do.
What did you want to do?
I wanted to build a tire wall house, which is kind of like an earth ship. So you get
tire wall,
yeah,
like from like the tires of your car?
tires of cars. So
Wow.
any place, tire shop or municipal dump will be glad, probably pay you to take these away. And you pack them with sand
Okay.
and use those like bricks, like very large, fat, round bricks. But
Wow. So
you build
have
walls out of that.
So you're laying down, so you're essentially laying the tires one on top of the other and then filling them with sand? Is that the idea?
Yes, and
I've never heard of
packing and
that.
packing and packing. But the local inspectors were not keen on that. They said, not a chance, and then he thought and said, well, if you have an engineer on site every day of construction, which means not a chance.
Right.
So I
Right.
started, what was important for me wasn't that it was a tire wall house or a straw bale house or this kind or that kind. The goal that I had was a sustainable home for my wife and me with an office and room for guests. That was my goal. So then I was free to use whatever I wanted to do as long as the end equation became sustainable.
And so you ended up using plywood, right? Is that just regular wood?
I used a slightly unconventional method called structural insulated panels, which is kind of like giant ice cream sandwiches, only instead of ice cream in the middle, you've got a 6-inch slab of styrofoam.
Okay.
And they kind of fit together like blocks.
Interesting. Yeah. And why would you want to use the tires and the sand or the bales of hay? Because bales of hay reminds me of medieval times, of how they used to build castles and homes during those times.
I liked the idea of getting paid to take building materials.
Okay.
But that didn't work out.
Is it the properties of the tire itself? Is it the rubber, or just the idea of recycling?
In those cases, it's just that the wall is very thick, and you can insulate those as well. So it's a large, solid structure. It's making use of a waste material.
Got it. And Brittany, did you want to add to the idea of building, design principles for building?
Building and design principles. I guess the only thing I really want to add is kind of talking about the needs again. So often we say, and I'm going to use a non-building example. This is water, but pretend it's coffee. So I need my coffee in the morning. You often hear people say this, and that's not really true. It's not the coffee people need. Coffee serves a lot of needs. Maybe they're wanting the security and comfort of having a warm beverage in the morning. Maybe they're wanting the bitters to help their digestive system move a little more smoothly. Maybe it's the caffeine, the feeling of awakeness, aliveness. Maybe that's what they're craving. Maybe they're craving all of that, and then coffee makes sense. But if they're only craving a few of those or one of those needs, which are more the real needs, needs are more on the emotional or physical safety scale, I guess. And so in terms of building, you don't need a straw bale house. You need safe shelter that is not doing as much harm to the environment, for instance, or yeah, I guess that's the way to put it. So often in permaculture, like on the gardening side, people say, hugelculture, we can talk about that later, but that's a permaculture thing, or perennial organic gardening, that's a permaculture thing. And maybe you don't need a perennial organic garden. Most people end up choosing that because it does make sense in a lot of cases. There's certain strategies that tend to be favorites of permaculturists, but none of those are strategies. None of those things are permaculture. Permaculture is really assessing those needs and meeting them in ways that, again, use those principles of nature, like mutually beneficial relationships, or working with nature, or looking at cycles. Everything in nature cycles, and if you have a straight line linear system, you have waste at the end.
And so then so the first question then that people need to ask themselves if they are thinking of applying these strategies then is, what do I need? Is that really the first question? What am I trying to accomplish in my home? Is that the first question you asked yourself, Douglas?
Yeah. I had a number of motivations for wanting a home, and it does come down to a need for shelter, but also a desire to have my own home. So, as Brittany is saying, it really comes down to nailing down, understanding what your goal is, what it is you're actually trying to do. If you don't know what it is you're actually trying to do, you're not likely to get to where you want to be, because you don't really know where you want to be, right? So that's really figuring out, okay, well, what do I need? What do I really, what's important?
In terms of what? In terms of what do I need in a house? What do I need, like, in terms of space? What do I need
in a social relationship? In terms
with
of
who? With nature?
Or
just
your family?
With your family?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, there could be a community member that things aren't kind of gelling with, and look at what they really need, what they're what the core need behind what they're saying is. Or, but again, I tend to apply permaculture not strictly on the building, but also on the way of life.
So are there any other considerations for people who have a piece of land and they're looking to build? So you mentioned the slope, you mentioned the sun, you mentioned the long edge of your home facing the sun, and as many up to 50% windows, right? Right. And on the ground, there's the layers of sand with cement.
That's sort of standard construction techniques, but to make way for a slab on grade, you might not be familiar with a slab on grade foundation, but if you talk to a contractor, they'll, oh yeah, I know what those are. So,
I have no idea.
Yeah. It's a concrete floor, essentially. So.
And is there anything else that people need to consider as they're building?
Well,
and designing.
Sun doesn't always come out. Well, there's a lot of things with designing, but the sun doesn't always come out. If my house were left to its own devices, and it's not, my design was consciously not fully optimized.
What does that mean?
It means that I have a second story in my home, which for a passive solar home like mine is not the ideal. It's not ideal to have two stories. I made a compromise based on my wife's desire to always, at some point, live in a house that has two floors. So she grew up in Japan, a traditional Japanese house.
So is that your house right there?
So what we're seeing on camera, what we're seeing is your house.
The second-story windows that you see there are not the perfect passive solar design. It's my compromise for her.
For her, got it.
Yeah.
So typically the house is one floor, is what you're saying, rectangular in shape and only one level, like a bungalow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if we take off during the winter and just abandon that place, it's going to stay at around 10 degrees Celsius, no matter what happens outside.
Oh, is that right?
10
Even in
degrees
the winter?
Celsius, it's a little bit chilly, right?
Okay.
10 degrees. So we have a backup heat system, and that's what's called a masonry heater. People would look at it and go, that's a fireplace.
Right.
But it's a masonry
it's not a
heater.
fireplace? What's the difference? What's a masonry heater for those who are interested?
A masonry heater is a fireplace that has the flue gases channel up through these circuitous channels inside the stove itself.
Okay.
It's a concrete mass in the center. There's a picture of me here wrapping it in bricks.
Right.
Now, just like the concrete floor, the concrete of the stove and the bricks are storing heat. So when we fire up a fire in that thing, it takes about 3.5 to 4 hours for the outside of that stove to be hot or warm, not dangerously hot,
no,
but
of course.
to be warm, and then it's radiating heat in the home.
Right.
Well, if it's a really cold day, it takes 12 hours to cool down, but if it's sort of your typical winter day, it takes about 24 hours for that thing to cool down.
Okay.
So I can fire up a quick fire in there,
Yes.
burn a load of wood inside, and there I go. I've got my heating met for 12 hours.
Okay. Well, what do you do then for electricity? Since I imagine you're not going to be running wires, right? Or are you?
We're a standard house. We're on the grid.
Okay.
The long-term plan is to get off the grid, eventually probably with a mix of solar and wind.
Right.
But, when financing becomes possible for that, then that'll happen. But it's taken in stages.
And so then solar panels are part of this equation as well for those people who, for either energy
in
or...
my case.
Okay. And is that something that many people in their design also consider or put in?
Some
Solar
people would.
panels?
Again, it goes back
Yes.
to your needs. Do you really
Okay.
need the electricity? How much do you need?
Right.
I guess if you look at the internet, for instance, using a system that we all intimately use, some people I know don't have internet at their houses. Instead, they choose to go to coffee shops or go to libraries or find ways that they can go out and actually meet people or maybe do some errands at the same time, and then they don't have that distraction at home. So I mean, that's not an electricity thing, but that is a bigger system thing. So again, looking at what you need.
And how you are living and how you want to live and how you envision yourself actually living your life in this way.
And one thing Douglas had just said about his house, for instance, is it's not maybe as a passive solar house ideal to have the 2 stories. But it's also one of his very, very core needs to make his wife happy.
Right.
So that's kind of looking at everything in permaculture. Nothing stands alone, and that is the largest problem of our society. Is we always try to separate everything.
Got it.
And to sound very hippie, everything is always connected.
Everything is connected. Well, then, what if you have a home already? Not forget about land, you have your house. Can you apply any of these principles of permaculture to your existing dwelling? How do you do that?
Absolutely.
Give me some examples.
Well, for instance, we live in an old 1940s house in Linden Lee, so it's kind of a community pretty close to downtown. Nobody's ever heard of it, right beside New Edinburgh, or Edinburgh, in between Rockcliffe and Vanier. So heart of Ottawa.
Yes.
And that's not changing anytime soon, as much as we'd love to move out to the country eventually. So one thing we do is we have kind of made a commitment to ourselves to spend as little money as possible while doing as much benefit as possible. And so, for instance, instead of going and buying really expensive wool curtains to close at night, because Germans and some other European countries do this very well, closing wool curtains, thick wool curtains at night in the winter will help dramatically with the heat escaping.
Interesting. We
didn't feel like buying expensive wool curtains or buying that material, so we got some $5 wool blankets from Value Village. I probably shouldn't have said that. Now there's going to be no more. But you know, as much as possible, we try to. Because some people are ethically opposed to wool, for instance. I am not ethically opposed to it, provided. You're giving it a second life, for instance. And so there's many, many, many reasons why we give that wool a second life, and we don't have to buy super expensive wool curtains, and we turn that into an interesting feature of our house that ends up actually saving us a lot on heating bills.
Interesting. And so wool curtains, that's something that people can use right away.
Yeah.
What's another?
Also wool sweaters.
Okay.
I do a twist on that. I put styrofoam plugs into my windows. So they cut to fit the sill, and at night we hold in a lot of heat. We just
Oh, I see.
That's interesting.
Okay. And so what else do you do in your home to apply some of these permaculture principles?
Another concept, are you familiar with the concept gray water?
No, I don't know what that is.
Okay, so gray water is so black water is what comes out of your toilet. You don't want to reuse that.
Okay.
But gray water would be something like shower water or laundry water that you can give a second life to instead of watering your vegetables from the tap or running out of rain barrel. We're doing dishes anyway. We don't have a dishwasher because it's an old house. We just don't have room for it. So we do it by hand. And in our sink, we've actually redirected our pipe in the summertime out into the garden to feed the vegetables, so that we basically never have to water. Our garden is also designed using permaculture principles and very mini earthworks. Yeah.
Yes.
Very many. In a way that it also captures and stores a lot of water just by itself. So in the middle of a really bad drought, we still basically don't have to water. We have abandoned, no, I shouldn't say abandoned. I felt like abandoning our garden for 2 months in the summer. Oops, that was the microphone.
Yes.
And it was still fine when we got back. The tomatoes were a little sad looking, but most of the plants were perfectly fine during a drought for 2 months in the summer.
And this is just from water that's running off from your sink, I imagine.
We also use some other strategies like using lots of mulch. That's another thing. If you think about natural ecosystems, the only time you really ever see exposed bare earth as we do often in farmer fields or traditional gardens, is if a natural disaster has come through of some kind, or humans have been there, basically.
All right.
Those are the only times you ever really see bare earth.
Now, I want you to hold that thought for me about bare earth, because we do have to go to break. Please stay tuned, everyone, as we continue our conversation on sustainable living strategies.